Well, hello everyone. Like Jeremy mentioned, I'm Peter Wisniewski, an engineer with the Department of Transportation of Wisconsin. Um, there's a lot to cover in these few slides that I have. As you mentioned, I've been in charge of this program since 2013, and we've come a long way since the beginning, but we also have a long way to go, in my opinion, on where we could be. Um, so starting things off, where we've come from. Back in 2013, I was tasked with addressing drift control issues across the state of Wisconsin. Uh, Prior to me taking over that role, it was a bit of a hodgepodge effort with lapses in decades and areas. Uh, and it was hit or miss on whether things were being done and recording of where installations were happening and how that process was going. And once I took over, as I dove deeper into this, it gained a life of its own and built into the program we have now. First slide, please. So getting started, these uh, these items themselves, they didn't all happen, as they are in the bullets here of one line after another. These were all happening simultaneously as we were developing this program out. So one of the first things we wanted to do was figure out, well, where do we have drift control around in the state currently? So our first effort was to drive our backbone, which is our interstates and our freeway routes, and figure out where we had existing drift control. And throughout that process, we were also going through previous projects and reviewing those for anything that had vegetation involved that was labeled as drift control, and verifying whether or not that for one was installed, if it's still there was a big factor, because some of the programs that or projects that had them were quite old, and there have been different could have been improvements since then, as they went through corridors and had reconstructs and things like that. Throughout this process, it took several years to also map all the remaining highways. So Google Earth was pretty crucial for this, combing through every highway, looking for the known pattern when you're seeing it from a satellite image, that staggering pattern for drift control, and and marking all that, labeling all that, as well as anything that could be perceived as drift control, and dropping down into that, say that street view, and looking to see what vegetation looks like, at least from those images from above, because what we wanted to make sure is if there was, say, an open field to the west or to the north, or depending on the highway's angle, we want to make sure we capture any of existing vegetation too, because the last thing we want is to potentially remove that in the future and then find out that it was indeed performing as drift control. Other things we're doing that I was doing was talking to other states with established programs. MnDOT was a big help. New York DOT was a big help. Iowa also. Then looking at the studies and the guidance that was already out there. You have Dr. Tabler. He's pretty infamous with drift control out of Wyoming. New York had a large study on living snow fence, as well as literature from Iowa and Colorado, and several studies from University of Minnesota, and literature from MnDOT. And all that really helps lay the groundwork to get things moving forward for the program, of what's out there, what we have, and how we can move forward. Next slide. And so over multiple years, again, none of this happens overnight, was building those relationships, and establishing rapport inside our own department. So I'd say it probably took like 5 years or more before I actually got further down in this list. Initially starting with our regional maintenance staff, the county highway staff, and those different entities, letting them know what our effort was, where we were trying to go with it, what its purpose was, using a lot of that same, again, literature and studies to bring that forward, because there was a lot of turnover. A lot of people forgot these prior methods of dealing with these issues with drifting. Instead, the main focus became plowing it rather than seeing if we can't trap or capture some of that off the highway to prevent these issues. Then as I got going and developed these relationships with regional staff, that eventually kind of bled over into our projects department, where maintenance staff was bringing this up to projects where they were having issues, and through that reached our safety engineers. And as soon as it got to their ears, they really didn't have this method of dealing with these items before. So much of what they were working with was, say, clear pavement or rain, versus what do we do about snow and ice. And so that led into that conversation with them, and eventually had some presentations. And so it was eye-opening for them of what we could potentially do. And that helped pull in even more efforts from the project side of the house. And then as things got going on, and there's been this large emphasis on pollinators across the country, we started looking at that. And with what we're doing here at WISDOT of using native vegetation, then that helped open the door with the environmental folks. We're establishing habitat. We're improving our corridor in those ways. And so we started getting the backing of them as well. And in the meantime, we're just constantly hammering the drift control and what we can do, and keeping that dialogue going, which is very important. So I just basically never let up as we were going across the department. And eventually over time, now there's pretty much the whole department is pretty well aware of drift control and its benefits. Next slide. So throughout this, we were looking at how we were doing things and encouraging improvement. And there's always room to improve as we're doing things. So one of the first ones, like paper to practice. I love this photo from Dr. Tabler of a drift in Wyoming. And now in Wisconsin, we don't have anything like that. So that's that paper to practice thing of we have these guidelines, but what are we actually dealing with? Our state doesn't look the same as some of these studies, and our regions don't have the same conditions. The southern Wisconsin is different than the north woods of Wisconsin. How it's being impacted and what those situations look like are different. The fact that we don't buy land for these projects or easements to put drift control off site, that leads into different issues. And so it's all of how can we improve our process and deal with the constraints that we currently have. And then inside projects, it was recognizing patterns that come across, like being involved in projects from the start and seeing, say, that they're putting in guardrail in certain areas, especially along abutments and where the road is elevated. How can we get them to put in some kind of measure where we're seeing a pattern of drift control later, or drifting caused by those guardrails later? So what can we do to address those and be proactive instead of reactive to them? And same with if we see that they're removing vegetation along the highway, let's take a look at what's going on and not create an improvement on the highway that ends up opening up a safety issue later for us for winter. Same for improvements of installation and establishment, and creating better guidelines for better results and methods and cost savings. And again, a lot of that helped with talking with neighboring states and seeing how they're improving things. And again, testing our methods and finalizing what works. And I think we have a pretty solid method right now of how we have a standard of how we put in at least living snow fence. But again, we're constantly asking, how can we improve? Next slide. So one of the main things I try to do outside of my normal projects that I operate, then it's working with our projects department and verify of the quarters they're in, what if there's existing drift control, if there's a need for drift control, if there is currently drift control there, what can we do to avoid removing it or improving it, adding to it, any of that. Then issues with getting and keeping drift control in projects, certainly living snow fence, vegetation. I don't know if it's this way in other states, but as we're trying to crunch numbers and make projects work inside certain budgets, one of the first things they'll look at is vegetation as a removal, which initially was an issue with living snow fence being in a project where it would get dropped. And instead, it was pushing that and getting more people, again, back to that communication thing of having safety engineers, the environmental staff and maintenance really pushing to make sure it stays inside projects. And a lot of that came from pushing the why, the driver safety, all the improvement there, the safety improvements, the pavement life cycle, longevity, and that preventing all the ice damming of the base layers, and just general added wear and tear on the road surface with all the additional plowing and all the additional salts, and to try to keep those roads clear. And then being a resource in the project as far as the design goes, and tracking the progress and the costs, and making sure that I was there to help them along the way. And again, with the safety side of things, we had a major improvement once we had crash factor modification numbers. Then suddenly the safety engineers had some teeth that they could put into ensuring these things stay inside projects. And then it really became a safety improvement along our roadways. And then from the maintenance side, again, that cost reduction of if they're plowing and all the additional salt and wear and tear. For example, if you could get solid numbers on what their existing costs are in certain areas, that's really helpful. For example, I have one was costing an additional $30,000 roughly per year to maintain a 2-mile corridor where there was sections where there was drifting. And with the improvement that we put in, it was the estimated living snow fence would pay for itself within 5 years, which is fantastic. And that's just a 2-mile corridor with some spots through it. And out of the roughly 12,000 miles of highway that WISDOT is in charge of maintaining, I have roughly 700 or 800 miles of recorded known drifting locations, and that was only for half the counties across the state. So even if you extrapolated all that out, the savings across the board of future savings as these installations pay for themselves could really add up for maintenance and pavement longevity and salt use. Next slide. And again, with this, we're always trying to improve this. I really like this one with our prairie that we planted. We talking with some of our environmental folks. The process of installing drift control was very similar to what the need was, at least the first couple of years, for installing native seed in a prairie. So we were able to combine those two together, plant the native seed next to the living snow fence, and have them managed at the same time, which greatly reduced the cost of installing these native seed areas. And so we've had a good success with that, and it's something that we're probably going to be moving forward with if the locations are right. Again, innovative thinking of how we can improve these items. A lot of that came from working with what we have inside of our right-of-way, keeping that dialogue going and providing guidance. The biggest factor really for this whole venture has been don't focus on why you can't make something happen, focus on how you can make it happen. And with that, that's what I have. Thanks.